Hey folks, g'day, hope you're doing well. Now, it's been a while since I've done a video, and in this video I want to look at the topic of disc bottom pans versus fully cladded pans. Now, the companies that make fully cladded pans will obviously try to tell you all the advantages of fully cladded pans, but in reality they don't always work better. And in fact, there are only very few situations where you would preferably need a fully cladded pan. So today we're going to discuss that. Now, on paper, fully cladded pans has its benefits, but this doesn't always translate into actual or noticeable benefits in real use. So let's explore this topic. Well, in a scientific way. And first of all, let's look at what is a fully cladded pan and what is a disc bottom pan. Now, this is the difference in construction between fully cladded pans and disc bottom pans. Now, to put it in a very simple way, a fully cladded pan has the same construction going up from the bottom of the pan all the way up to the edge of the pan. So in other words, the pan is basically a single body, right? Obviously excluding the handle. So in this case, you've got a 5-layer construction of 2 layers with aluminium and 3 layers of stainless steel. So that is going all the way up to the edge of the pan, right? And this is what you call a fully cladded pan. And obviously different manufacturers or different models may have different numbers of layers, but this is the concept of construction. And on the right, I couldn't really find a good picture, so I just drew a diagram. A disc bottom pan, well, the name is pretty self-explanatory. So typically they have just a single layer body on the side walls, is typically made out of a single layer, thin single layer of stainless steel. And the bottom, however, is a much thicker disc that's somehow bonded to the body of the pan. So the disc, again, the construction of the disc will vary depending on the manufacturer and the model, but typically there is a layer of aluminium. There is typically 1 or more layers of aluminium in combination with stainless steel. So again, in a simple way, it has a disc, thick disc, bonded to a thicker disc, not necessarily thick, but thicker disc, bonded to a single layer stainless steel body. So here, let's have a look at 2 or 3 examples of fully cladded pans versus disc bottom pans. So this is a Demela Atlantis Proline 7 in the 24 centimeter size. And as you can see, this whole pan, excluding the handle, of course, so this is basically one piece. There is no disc on the bottom. So the construction of the bottom of the pan, it goes all the way up to the edge of the pan, and then they seal it right here on the edge. So the thickness here is exactly the same as the thickness here. So again, this is basically one piece. And this pan happens to be made out of 7 layers, but okay, that's not the topic of this discussion. But you have 7 layers from the bottom here going all the way up to the edge like this. Okay. And what I have here is a Demela Apollo stock pot. Now, this is a typical disc bottom pan. So the size of the pan, the sidewall, is a single stainless steel layer. Okay, so this layer, I think it's about 1 millimeter thick, or maybe, yeah, okay, so let's say it's about 1 millimeter thick. But it does have a very thick bottom. So the bottom is basically a disc that they, that they attach to the body of the pan, right? So this is again a 7-layer disc. I believe it's got 3 layers of stainless steel on the bottom, followed by a thick layer of aluminium, followed by another layer of stainless steel. So this is made in a way that it is induction compatible. But here basically, so you have a disc that's bonded to a thin stainless single layer shell. Okay, so this is what you call a disc bottom pan. And the last example here I want to show you is a disc bottomed Fister pan. So this is a very heavy duty large fry pan. So it's very large, 34 centimeters in diameter. But in the the size of the pan is a single layer stainless steel. So it's not like the Proline that I just shown you. This is a single layer stainless steel that's attached to a thick disc of on the bottom. Now, I'm not exactly sure how Fister builds they're discs, but there is a thick layer of aluminium. I just don't know exactly how thick it is. So a disc bottom fry pan, you got a thick bottom bonded to a thin stainless steel body. Now, if we look at the heating profile of a fully cladded pan versus a disc bottom pan, so this is where you see the advantage, or this is where the advantage is with a fully cladded pan, and that is the heat goes up evenly all the way up the sides of the pan, okay? Whereas a disc bottomed pan, the bottom disc gets heated, and thus it transfers the heat through the stainless steel layer into the food, but there is typically a temperature discontinuity where the edge of the disc meets the side of the pan. So in other words, the side of the pan is not actively, okay, so that's the term they use, the side of the pan is not actively heated, as is the case with the bottom of the pan. So the other, possible disadvantage with a disc bottom pan is that typically the disc on the bottom, it does not go all the way to the side walls, to the edge of the side walls, and therefore sometimes you could get what you call scorching in a ring around the bottom. Okay, so this is if you have a gas hob that's a little bit big, and the flame wraps up around the side of the pan, and that's where you can get scorching around the edges. So that is one disadvantage of a disc bottomed pan. Now, as mentioned at the beginning of the video, a fully cladded pan sometimes, in fact in many cases, serves no practical benefit. So now we're going to address that issue. And the question you have to ask yourself are basically these kind of questions. So what kind of pan are you using, right? And how large is the pan? What are you cooking? And do you need to actively heat the sides of the pan? So these are the things that you've got to think about when deciding if or not you need a fully cladded pan. So now we're going to have a look at some examples, and we're also going to do, towards the end, a more scientific analysis on how much a fully cladded pan contributes to the actual heating of the food inside the pan. Now let's look at an example of a skillet. So this is one case where a fully cladded pan is, I would say, is preferable. So here this is the Demela Proline Atlantis Proline 7. It's a 7-layer construction, fully cladded all the way up to the edge. So if you're going to saute a large volume of vegetables like I'm doing here, and the food is obviously touching the side of the pan, then yes, a fully cladded pan will be preferable, because you don't want the cooking to only happen on the bottom. You want the cooking to also happen, or at least to some extent, where the food touches the edge of the pan. So this is one case where I would use a fully cladded pan over a disc bottomed pan. So here in another example, we're searing a steak. Now this is one case where a fully cladded pan will serve no benefits whatsoever. And that's because the steak is not going anywhere near the side of the pan. So regardless whether the side of the pan is heated or not heated, it's not doing anything, because the steak is cooked by the bottom of the pan. So in this case, a disc bottom pan with a very thick bottom, like the Pfister that I showed you at the beginning of the video, is going to work better than a fully cladded pan that's thinner overall, because of the additional thermal mass at the bottom, which will contribute to searing that steak and creating that Maillard reaction, so you get a nice browning on the steak. Okay, so if I was to cook a steak, I would definitely choose a thick disc bottom pan as opposed to a thinner overall fully cladded pan. Now, for the case of a casserole or Dutch oven, for me at least, a pan with a very thick bottom is much more preferable than a fully cladded or typical fully cladded pan. So here I've got a brazier, a low brazier. This is like a low casserole, and this is a Demela Atlantis 5.2 liter casserole or Dutch oven. Now, both of these have very thick bottoms. So this one, I don't know exactly how thick this is, but this is very, very thick, and it is thicker than any of your typical fully cladded 3-layer or 5-layer pan, right? And the same goes for this Demela Atlantis. So again, this is a disc bottom. It's got 2 millimeters of copper with 3 millimeters of stainless steel on the bottom, and another, sorry, 3 layers of stainless steel on the bottom and another layer of stainless steel on top. So both of these pans, they can hold a lot of heat on the bottom. Okay, much more than a typical 3-layer or 5-layer pan. Now, the reason that this is, for me, this is preferable because is that in a lot of these recipes, right, in a stew or casserole, you will start off by either searing the meat or sweating vegetables, right? And for both of these purposes, you want a pan with a very thick bottom that can hold a lot of heat to minimize that temperature drop, so you get a nice browning on the meat. And or you don't burn your vegetables, especially onions, for example. Okay, so when you sweat your vegetables, onions or leek, whatever, okay, the idea is to slowly sweat them and not burn them, and that's what that thick bottom is going to help you with. Okay, so next, the next step is typically introducing liquid, right? A stock or water, and most of the time, this whole pot is going to go in the oven. So when it goes into the oven, it makes absolutely no difference whatsoever whether the sides are fully cladded or it's just a single layer, right? So next, we're going to talk about a soup or stock pot. Now, in the case of a soup pot or stock pot, a fully cladded pan is completely unnecessary. Okay, it's 100% unnecessary. So what I have here is a Demela Apollo 8-liter soup or stock pot, or you can also use this as a casserole or Dutch oven. And this is, in my opinion, probably the best value for money soup pot or stock pot that you can get. So here you can pick this up for about 140 euros, and this is a pot that will last you a lifetime. So again, very thick bottom with a thin single layered side. Now that thick bottom may not be necessary for a stock pot if you're only going to use it as a stock pot. But for me, it's absolutely crucial for a soup pot because I use the same pot for both purposes. Now, because for a soup pot, again, a lot of soup recipes is going to start off by slowly sweating the vegetables on the bottom of the pan. And that thick layer on the bottom is going to help you to stop the vegetables, the onions, for example, from getting burnt or getting brown. Okay. So now we're going to have a look at 2 scientific reasons, or go into scientific detail of why it is not necessary. And the first, I've got a couple of slides, PowerPoint slides to show you. The first reason is that if this is going to be full of liquid, right, the liquid itself, the rotation or the movement of the liquid itself in the pan, that is going to be your heating medium. And the second reason, and this is where I'm going to use an Excel sheet to actually do a calculation, is that the heat capacity of liquid is much greater than any metal. Okay, so the heat stored in the liquid is so much greater than the heat stored on the side of the pan. So you could almost say that the liquid inside the pan is heating the side of the pan more than the side of the pan is heating the liquid on the inside of the pan. So now we're going to have a look at this in a bit more detail. Right, so we've already spoken about how the internal movement of the liquid inside the pan is the heating medium, so it's distributing the heat within itself. Right, the hot liquid will rise and the cold liquid will fall, and this is common physics. So next we're going to have a look at exactly how much a fully cladded pan contributes, or how much more a fully cladded pan contributes to the heating compared to a non-fully cladded, a single layer sidewall. Okay, so in this example, we're assuming a tri-ply, so a 3-ply sidewall compared to a single layer sidewall. So now on the 3-ply sidewall, we've got 0.2 millimeters of stainless on the outside, 2.2 millimeters of aluminium in the center, and 0.2 millimeters on the inside. And for the single layer sidewall, we're just going to assume a 1 millimeter thickness of stainless steel. Sorry, that's a mistake. Okay, it's 1 millimeters of stainless steel, not 1 millimeters of aluminium. So once again, it's stainless steel. Okay, so now let's have a look at an example. So I'm going to talk you through the calculation steps. But once again, as in my previous videos, this is a very simplified calculation because if you really want to do this in detail, you're going to need some complicated mathematical modeling, right? So we're not going to do that. We're just going to make a lot of basic, simple assumptions that are not completely true in real life, but it's good enough for the purpose of this demonstration. Okay, so let's get into that. All right, guys, so here we are. In this scenario, we are assuming that we are heating 5 kilograms of water, so 5 kilograms or 5 liters of water in a single layer, in a pan with a single layer stainless sidewall, and also in a pan with a tri-ply sidewall, okay, as shown in the PowerPoint just before. So let me quickly take you through this calculation. Don't worry too much if you can't follow it, but it's not too difficult. So we assume a diameter of 24 centimeters, so typical diameter of 24 centimeters. The height of the vessel is 11 centimeters. The thickness is 1 millimeter, right? Now, from the diameter or the radius, we calculate the circumference, so that's the distance all the way around the edge of the pan. And we also calculate the area, so the area is the circumference multiplied by the height of the pan. So imagine that we are taking the edge of the pan and folding it out, flattening it out into a sheet of paper, let's say, right? So onto a flat surface. Now the volume is calculated by the area of the pan multiplied by the thickness of the pan. So the area, that's this number here, multiplied by this number, which is 1 millimeter, and that's the volume of the total volume of the layer of stainless steel on the side of the pan. Now we know, or we assume, an approximate density of 7,500 kilograms per meters cubed of the density of stainless steel. And if we multiply the density by the volume, we get the total mass. So this is the total mass of the sidewall of that single layer stainless pan, okay, the single layer on the side. And we assume a temperature increase of 80 degrees. So let's say it's going from 20 degrees to 100 degrees. So that's a difference of 80 degrees. The increase in temperature on the side of the pan. And the specific heat. Now, if you watch my previous videos, I'm not going to explain this equation again, but this is basically the amount of heat required to raise the temperature of a particular material by 1 degree Celsius. So for the case of stainless steel, it's approximately 490. So if we apply the heat equation, which is the mass times the specific heat times the increase in temperature, we get a number of approximately 24,000 joules. Okay, so the sidewall of this non-cladded pan going from 20 to 100 degrees, so with a delta T, with a temperature difference of 80 degrees, can store approximately 24,000 joules of heat. Okay, so remember this number here, 24,000 joules. So for the tri-ply pan, well, the calculation method is the same, except that you're going to have to do this for each of the layers, right? So if I just make this a little bit bigger, if we look at the outer stainless layer, exactly the same calculation method. We go through the steps to find out the volume, multiply the volume by the density, you get the mass. But of course, in this case, the thickness is much, much smaller. It's only 0.2 millimeters. And we get the heat stored approximately 4,800 kilojoules based on a temperature increase of 80 degrees on a mass of 0.12. Now the center layer is going to be much bigger because it's much thicker, right? So, you know, exactly the same diameter, same height, same much bigger thickness, much bigger thickness, same circumference, same area, bigger volume because of the increased thickness. The density of aluminium is approximately this number, 2,700. And from the density, we get the mass and apply the same change in temperature with the specific heat for aluminium. We get a much bigger number of 35,000 joules approximately. And then we do the same calculation for the internal stainless steel layer. So here we get a number of 44,000 or close to 45,000 joules. So this is obviously almost twice as big as the single layer sidewall on the non-cladded pan. But what about the water itself, right? So we got 5 kilograms of water in the pan. The specific heat of water, as you can see straight away, is much, much bigger, far greater than that of any of the metals that we have here. So it takes 4,200 kilojoules approximately to heat 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree Celsius, or to increase the temperature by 1 degree Celsius. And if we increase the temperature by 80 degrees here, we get an extremely high number of 1.68 million joules. So now you can, oh, sorry for that. What is happening? So now you can see how insignificant a fully cladded pan is, or the difference that it makes. How insignificant is the difference compared to the actual amount of heat the water itself can store. So here, hopefully you can see that for a soup pot, stock pot, or maybe even a casserole, that a fully cladded piece makes, well, basically negligible difference to the overall cooking process. But of course, as I said in the beginning, this is a very simplified calculation. It's only there to give you an idea. It's not a very scientific or a very accurate analysis, but it's good enough to, you know, present the actual, just to present the concept. If we just do a quick calculation of the difference, you know, it only makes 1% difference. So that's all the difference that a fully cladded pan makes if you are going to be cooking mostly with liquid. Right, so the last little section I want to talk about is the case for saucepans. So here there are a couple of considerations. Because a saucepan is typically small, much smaller than a stock pot or a casserole pot, the role that the cladding plays, right, the role that a fully cladded piece plays is bigger, relatively speaking, because the pans tend to be small. So let's look at it this way. If you go with a conical, if you got a conical pan, now on a gas hob, I would definitely go for fully cladded, right? And this is to avoid the flame wrapping around the small bottom of the pan, which can create scorching. Because once again, remember, these pans tend to be quite small. So it's quite easy for the flame to wrap around the bottom and create this ring of fire, this scorching, which you definitely don't want. Now, if you got a conical, if you're going to get a conical saucepan and you got an electric hob, so any sort of flat top, I would still go for a cladded pan, and that's again, you know, because the bottom diameter is much smaller, we want the maximum possible heat conduction up the sides of the vessel. So in that case, I would still go for a conical pan. Go for a fully cladded pan. But having said that, my personal pan for saucepan, I've got a copper saucepan, 20 centimeters. I've also got a Demela Atlantis, and that is actually a disc bottom pan. Okay, but so there are exceptions, but in most cases, I would choose a fully cladded in this case. So if you got a, what do you do if you got a straight-sided saucepan? Well, if it's small, let's say less than 16 centimeters bottom diameter or top diameter, I would still go for a fully cladded, okay? And this is again to avoid the scorching at the bottom, especially if you're gonna use a gas hob. But when the diameter of the bottom increases, it doesn't really matter. As long as the flame does not wrap around the bottom of the pan, so you don't get the scorching, then as long as you stir the food often inside the pan, or stir the sauce or liquid inside the pan, then your results are going to be just as good. So this is all that I wanted to talk about in this video. I hope you found it helpful. And so I mean, yeah, as you can see, I guess we could conclude by saying that well, a fully cladded pan is not essential, but is preferable in about maybe 25% of the cases. So I hope you enjoy this little analysis, and I will see you in the next video.